and their need to get on with the job. And the responsibility of that now is going to fall on Queen Camilla's shoulders and also Prince William.
On the morning of March 16th, 2026, a series of legal instruments were filed with the Crown Estate's Official Property Management Office that restructured the ownership and control of 3 privately held royal estates that had never appeared on any public register of Crown property. The instruments were authorised by Prince William, not by King Charles, not by the palace's joint management structure, by William alone, acting under the formal institutional authority that had been transferred to him on March 14, 2026, the documented shift that gave him final decision-making power over a defined and significant set of institutional matters. The 3 estates in question were properties that had been held in a structure of private royal trust since the late years of Queen Elizabeth's reign. Properties that Elizabeth had never formally disclosed as part of her public estate management. Properties whose existence was known within the palace's legal and financial administration, but that had remained invisible to the outside world, including, it appears, to the Camilla family members who had been operating on the assumption that certain arrangements made during Charles's reign would protect their interests in them. When the news reached those family members on the afternoon of March 28th, the reaction was described by sources close to the situation as furious. Today we are going to tell you everything: what these hidden estates actually are and where they are located, why Queen Elizabeth kept them off the public register, what arrangements Charles had made regarding them during his reign, and what those arrangements had led Camilla's family to expect, what William did on March 28th, and why he had both the legal authority and the institutional logic to do it, and what the response from Camilla's family reveals about the tension that has been building inside the palace between the generation of Charles and the generation of William. We are going to take our time with this, because this is a story about inheritance, about power, and about what it means when the next generation decides to do things differently from the generation before it. So settle in, and let's begin. To understand what William did on March 28th, you first need to understand what the hidden estates actually were. Because the phrase hidden estates could mean many things, and the specific meaning in this case is important and worth explaining clearly. The British royal family is in a somewhat unusual legal position when it comes to property ownership. There are several distinct categories of royal property, and understanding the difference between them is essential to understanding this story. The first category is the Crown Estate. This is a vast portfolio of land and property across the United Kingdom, urban estates in London, agricultural land, coastal properties, forests, that formally belongs to the Crown, but is managed by an independent organisation called the Crown Estate Commissioners. The revenue from the Crown Estate goes to the Treasury, which then pays back a portion to the monarch as the sovereign grant. The Crown Estate is not the monarch's private property. It cannot be sold by the monarch or passed through private inheritance. The second category is the private royal estates, properties that genuinely belong to the monarch personally, purchased with private money and passed down through inheritance. Sandringham in Norfolk and Balmoral in Scotland are the 2 most famous examples. These are privately owned. They do not belong to the nation. They can be passed to whoever the monarch chooses to leave them to. The third category, and this is the one at the centre of the March 15th events, is more complex. It consists of properties that have been held over the decades within private trust structures, not formally declared as part of the public Crown Estate, not formally included in the list of private royal residences that appears in published accounts of the royal family's assets, but real properties with real value, held in legal structures that were designed to provide privacy and flexibility in how they were managed and how their future was determined. Queen Elizabeth built and maintained several of these trust structures over her long reign. She was a woman of considerable financial sophistication, advised by expert legal and property counsel throughout her decades as monarch. and the arrangements she created were not unusual for someone managing a substantial private estate. They were simply less visible than the publicly known properties. The three estates that William's legal instruments addressed on March 28, 2026 were in this third category. Properties in the English countryside, 2 in the south of England and 1 in Scotland, that had been held within trust structures authorised during Queen Elizabeth's reign. Properties that had never appeared in the media coverage of royal property holdings. Properties that most people, including most people who follow the royal family closely, did not know existed. What made these particular properties significant was not just their existence. It was what had happened to them during Charles's reign. In the months following Queen Elizabeth's death in September 2022, Charles had undertaken a comprehensive review of the private financial inheritance he had received from his mother. That review included the trust structures. And in the course of managing those structures, Charles had made a series of decisions about how the properties within them would be administered going forward. Some of those decisions involved arrangements that benefited Camilla's family, specifically long-term occupancy agreements for 2 of the 3 properties that gave members of Camilla's extended family the right to use and manage those properties for periods of up to 25 years. The arrangements were made privately. They were legal. They were within Charles's authority as the inheriting owner of the trust structures. And they were, by all accounts, made out of a genuine desire to ensure that the people his wife loved most would have security and a physical connection to properties that Camilla herself had come to love during her years as a companion and then as a wife to the man who would become king. That is a father-in-law's decision, a husband's decision, a human decision made from love. But it was also a decision that William, when he examined the trust structures in the context of his new institutional authority in March 2026, determined had been made in a way that created complications for the future management of those properties, and for the institution's ability to exercise appropriate oversight over assets that, while technically private, were directly connected to the royal family's identity and public position. Now, if you are watching this for the first time and you want to follow this story all the way through as it develops, and there is considerably more still unfolding, please subscribe right now. We cover the royal family in the depth and detail these stories deserve. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and every new video comes straight to you. Let's talk about what William's legal instruments actually did. Because the word seizing is the word that sources close to Camilla's family have used, and that has driven the anger they are describing, and it requires some examination. William did not evict anyone from any property. He did not cancel the occupancy agreements overnight or instruct anyone to vacate. What he did was more structural and in some ways more significant than an immediate eviction. He restructured the legal ownership and management of the 3 trust properties so that the final authority over decisions regarding their use, maintenance, development, and eventual inheritance rested with the Crown's institutional management rather than with the private arrangements that Charles had put in place. In practical terms, this means that the 25-year occupancy agreements that Charles had granted to members of Camilla's family are now subject to a review process, a formal institutional review that will assess whether those agreements are consistent with the appropriate management of properties that, while privately held, carry the royal family's name and institutional weight. That review does not automatically terminate the agreements, but it does create a mechanism through which they can be modified, renegotiated, or in circumstances that the review determines warrant it, ended. Read that again, not ended immediately, but subject to a review that William controls, with outcomes that William, under the institutional authority formally transferred to him on March 14th, has the power to determine. That is what furious means in the context of Camilla's family's reaction. Not that they have been told to leave. but that the protection they believe Charles's private arrangements had given them has been replaced by an institutional review process controlled by a man who is building the monarchy of the future and who does not appear to have factored their interests into the centre of that future. Those two things, Charles's protection and William's review, carry very different levels of security. And the people who understood that difference were the first to understand why March 28, 2026 was not a bureaucratic adjustment. It was a statement. Let's talk about why William did this, because understanding his reasoning is as important as understanding what he did. The first reason is institutional consistency. William has spent the first months of his new authority building a framework in which the royal family's institutional assets, properties, patronages, associations, formal positions are managed according to documented, transparent, reviewable processes rather than through the informal private arrangements of the previous generation. The conduct protocol for family members, the ethics audit requirements for non-working royals, the authority transfer itself, the 3 trust properties and the private occupancy arrangements Charles had created within them were exactly the kind of informal, undocumented, privately negotiated asset management that William's framework is designed to replace. Not because they were wrong in intent, but because they were not managed through the processes that William believes the institution needs if it is to maintain credibility and accountability in the years ahead. In William's institutional logic, a property connected to the royal family's name that is being used by members of a former commoner's extended family under a private 25-year arrangement, with no public disclosure, no institutional oversight, no review mechanism, is a liability. Not because the people involved are untrustworthy, but because the lack of institutional visibility means that if questions ever arise about those arrangements, the institution cannot defend them with documented process. It can only defend them with the word trust. And William has concluded, through the events of March 2026 and through the broader pattern of challenges the palace has faced, that trust is not sufficient. Documentation and oversight are sufficient. The second reason is more personal and more complicated. William's relationship with Camilla has been, across the years, one of the most carefully managed in the royal family. He was a child of 7 when his parents separated and 11 when Diana died. The years that followed included the gradual public introduction of Camilla into his father's life, his father's marriage to her in April 2005, and the long, slow adjustment of an institution and a family to a woman whose presence had been at the centre of so much pain. William has, by the accounts of those who know him, reached a place of functional and respectful relationship with Camilla as a person. He does not appear to carry bitterness. He has acknowledged publicly and in his own way that she makes his father happy and that she has conducted herself as queen with a dignity and a commitment that he respects. But respect for Camilla, the person, is not the same as a willingness to have the institution shaped around the long-term interests of Camilla's extended family, the children and grandchildren of her previous marriage, people who did not grow up in the royal family. People whose connection to the institution runs through their grandmother's marriage to a king rather than through birth or duty or the kind of sustained lifetime service that William believes confers genuine institutional standing. The March 14th instruments are, in that reading, a line between who belongs to the institution in the deepest sense and who belongs to it through association. Between those whose futures the institution has a genuine obligation to protect and those whose futures are, warmly, respectfully, but finally, their own to manage. Not with cruelty, but with a clarity that Charles, who loves Camilla and who made decisions shaped by that love, was not positioned to provide. Let's take a moment here. We are at the midpoint of this story, and the section ahead covers how Camilla herself has responded and what the reaction from her family tells us about the dynamics inside the palace right now. If you are finding this as significant as we do, please share this video with someone who follows the royal family and who would want to understand it properly. It takes just a moment. Thank you. Let's talk about Camilla, because her position in this story requires careful handling and fair treatment. Camilla has not, by the accounts of any source speaking to trusted journalists, publicly expressed the fury that her family members have expressed. Those close to her describe a woman who understands, who has always understood with the particular intelligence of someone who has spent decades navigating the most complex institutional relationship in the world, that the monarchy's logic does not always accommodate the preferences of the people within it. She knew, when she married Charles, that the institution she was entering had its own gravity, its own rules, its own timeline, that the decisions made within it are shaped by forces that outweigh any individual's wishes, however powerful that individual might be. What those close to Camilla describe is not fury. It is a complicated, private sorrow. Not at William's decision, she appears to have understood, in the days following March 28th, that the review process was inevitable, and that the informal nature of the arrangements Charles had made left them vulnerable to exactly this kind of institutional correction. But at the particular sadness of watching the protections a man who loves you puts in place be formally reviewed and potentially withdrawn by the next generation. That is the human truth at the center of this story. Not institutional conflict or political strategy, but the gap between what love can do and what institutions will allow. Charles wanted Camilla's family to have security. He had the power to create that security within the structures he controlled. He used it. That was an act of love. William has the institutional responsibility to ensure that those structures serve the monarchy's long-term interests. He is exercising it. That is an act of leadership. Both things can be true simultaneously, and the tension between them is not a scandal. It is the ordinary, painful reality of institutions in transition, where what one generation builds, the next must assess and sometimes rebuild. Now let's talk about what Camilla's family has actually said, because the word furious is not an interpretation. It is, according to sources speaking to journalists covering the palace this week, an accurate description of the reaction from specific members of Camilla's extended family, her son Tom Parker Bowles and her daughter Laura Lopes, when the implications of the March 15th instruments became clear to them. Tom Parker Bowles, who is Camilla's son from her first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, is a well-known food writer and journalist. He and his sister Laura have, since their mother's marriage to Charles, occupied a social position that is neither fully royal nor fully private, present at royal occasions, connected to the institution through their mother, but without the formal royal status that would give them the protections and the standing that come with it. The occupancy arrangements that Charles had created for 2 of the 3 hidden estate properties had, according to sources close to the family, given Tom and Laura and their respective families a physical connection to properties that their mother had come to regard as a part of her home landscape, not permanent residences, but properties they could use, manage and regard as a meaningful expression of their connection to the royal family and to Camilla's place within it. The review process that William's March 28th instruments created has placed that connection under formal institutional assessment. And the anger, as described by sources, is the anger of people who believed they had security and have discovered that the security was more fragile than they understood. Royal expert Richard Palmer, speaking to media this week, described the situation as a significant and deliberate signal from William about where the boundaries of the institution lie. It is, Palmer said, one of the clearest expressions yet of the difference between the Charles reign and what the William reign will look like. Charles extended the institution's informal reach outward toward the people around the people he loved. William is drawing it back in. Let's look at the broader pattern. Because the hidden estates restructuring of March 28th does not stand alone. It is part of a sequence that has been unfolding throughout March 2026, and that taken together describes something significant about how the British monarchy is being shaped under William's emerging authority. On March 4th, Charles rejected Harry's $59 million bill. On March 9th, Harry's return plan was formally rejected. On March 14th, authority was formally transferred to William. On March 15th, Beatrice and Eugenie were banned from Ascot. On March 17th, Harry's allowance was eliminated. On March 19th, Princess Anne discovered the secret commercial plan for Queen Elizabeth's archives and blocked it. On March 26th, the Bower Book was published and hit number 1. On March 18th, the hidden estate instruments were filed. Each of those events, on its own, is significant. Together, they describe an institution that is moving quickly, deliberately, and in a single clear direction toward a future that is leaner, more accountable, more formally documented, and more fully controlled by the generation that will lead it for the next 40 years. That generation is William's generation, and the shape it is imposing on the institution reflects values, transparency, accountability, institutional loyalty over personal loyalty that are genuinely different from the values that shaped the Charles era. The Charles era was defined by a deep personal love for Camilla, for his children, including a troubled Harry, for the ideal of a monarchy that could carry both the old and the new. That love produced generosity, informal arrangements, and a willingness to extend the institution's protection to the people Charles cared about. William's era, which is beginning before Charles has left, is defined by something colder and more rigorous, a conviction that the institution survives not through personal loyalty, but through documented process, not through informal arrangements, but through institutional accountability, not through generosity toward individuals, but through clarity about who belongs and on what terms. Both approaches have merit, both have cost, and the transition between them is producing exactly the kind of friction: Harry's rejected return, the Beatrice and Eugenie distancing, and now the hidden estate restructuring, that transitions between generations always produce. What happens next, whether the review of Camilla's family's occupancy arrangements produces a modification of those arrangements or confirms them, is not yet determined. Sources close to William's team say the review is genuine, not predetermined. That if the arrangements can be structured in a way that satisfies the institutional oversight requirements, they will be. That the goal is not to hurt Camilla's family, it is to document what was previously undocumented. Camilla's family will have the opportunity to engage with that review. Whether they engage constructively or whether the fury that March 18th produced becomes the dominant register of their response is a question that will shape both the outcome of the review and the relationship between the two generations of this particular family dynamic for years to come. Let's end where this story is most human. There is a version of Charles that is very easy to understand when you hold this story in its full complexity. A man who spent decades as the heir to the throne, waiting to become king, loving a woman that the institution resisted, surviving the years of Diana's death and public grief and his own diminished public standing. A man who became king at 73 and who knew from the day he took the throne that his reign would be shorter than he would have wished, and who, in that shorter reign, in the private structures of trust and property that came to him through his mother, tried to give the people he loved a security that he could not guarantee through any formal institutional mechanism, who used what was his, genuinely, legally, entirely his, to build a protection for Camilla's family that would outlast his own ability to protect them. That is not an abuse of power. It is a father and a husband doing what fathers and husbands do when they have the means to do it. And now the son who will be king, the one who was 7 when his parents separated, who was 11 when Diana died, who walked behind his mother's coffin on a September morning that none of us will forget, is reviewing those protections with the cold, necessary clarity of someone who understands that his job is not to honor the arrangements of the generation before him. His job is to build the institution that survives the generation after him. Both of those men are acting from love. Both of them are right in their own context, and the gap between them, the human gap between a father's love and a son's duty, is what is producing the fury in Camilla's household and the quiet determination in William's. That gap is not going to close quickly. It may never close entirely. But the institution will endure. It has always endured. By making exactly these kinds of difficult, necessary, humanly costly transitions from one era to the next. That is what a monarchy is, not a family. An institution that uses a family as its human face. And right now, the face it is, presenting to the world, is William's, clear-eyed, determined, and entirely prepared to do what needs to be done. Thank you so much for watching today all the way to the end. This is one of the most layered stories we have covered on this channel. It sits at the intersection of inheritance, institutional power, family love, and the gap between generations. And we are grateful to everyone who stayed with it through all of it. If it gave you something to think about, please leave a comment below. Tell us whether you think William was right to restructure the hidden estate arrangements, or whether Charles's decision to protect Camilla's family should have been honoured by his son. We read every comment, and your perspective shapes what we cover next. And if you are not yet subscribed, please do it now. Click subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you. We will see you soon.